Hi, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic women characters in literature. I'm Dr. Gurunath Badiger, Associate Professor of English, Government Portrayed College and PG Center, Dharwad, Karnataka. As a part of the short term course, I'm going to deliver a talk on some important characters in literature. Before we talk about women characters in literature, let us talk something about what is literature and how women characters play a very important role in literature. As we all know, literature is an expression of life. It is oral or written. Some of the best literatures are available in oral forms, what we call folk tales, oral songs. A lot of oral narratives are in currency or in existence. Later, we see the coming of written literature. This what we call literature is the expression of best that is thought and the best that is written. The best thoughts are written in the best words. That's what we call literature. What is the raw material of literature? The raw material of literature is life itself. It is influenced by lands and people around us. There is life, a human life, and its connection with nature, its connection with society, its connection with men and manners. Naturally, literature portrays a society. That's what we call literature holds mirror to society. Normally, we find literature is full of characters, caricatures, the men, women, and their manners. So, whenever we are talking about characters, there are male characters and female characters. So, female characters played a very important role in creation of literary texts. Female played a very important role both as writers as well as characters in literary texts. So, women characters in literature represent a wide variety of persons with unique features. Today, I'm going to talk about some interesting characters selected from different texts of different countries. They are all representative, of course. It is not, it is done only on the basis of our minimum knowledge of literary texts. I'll be talking about some uh, characters which influenced me, rather, I should say. My knowledge goes. I would be talking about some characters. I categorize the characters as women, as paragon of beauty, women as intelligent lawyer, variety of things. Now I would be talking about the first character that I have chosen here as Helen of Troy. Helen. Helen is the subject of discussion in Greek literature, particularly. Helen continues to influence a lot of writers in Renaissance period, lot of painters during Renaissance period. Helen of Troy is known as the woman and as a paragon of beauty and the world famous beauty. And today we use the word Miss Universe, like that. And you can consider this woman as the most beautiful woman in the world. And She created mm, a big change in the Greco-Roman relationships at that time. She is said to have been the most beautiful woman in the world. There is a mythology related to her. Uh, Mythology means she was born of the union between God, Zeus, and Leda. There is a beautiful poem by W.B. Yeats, Leda and the Swan. Zeus came in the form of a swan and united forcibly with Leda, and Leda laid two eggs, and out of two eggs, one gave birth to mm, this Helen, another Clytemnestra. And Helen married Menelaus, the king of Sparta. And finally, what happened in the story, we come to know that Helen was, most attractive, woman, and Paris was attracted by her beauty. And it is said that Paris of Troy seduced her or took her with him, and it is responsible for 10 years Trojan War. And there is a beautiful film called The Helen of Troy. You know, this beauty particularly um, caused problem to both Trojans and Greeks, and they had to fight for 10 years for the sake of Helen, and huge literature is written on her beauty. We are now talking about Hellenic beauty. And now talking about Hellenic paintings. Renaissance paintings were also influenced by this woman, and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the two great epics in Greek, and talk about Helen's beauty at the same time her nature. We also find reference of Helen in Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus is a German scholar and a physicist, and he too wanted to see the beauty of Helen. When he sees Helen, he says, "Is this the face that launched thousand ships? Is this the face that caused that burned the topless towers of Ilium? You know, uh, for I am ready to burn another Wittenberg for the kiss of Helen." That's how even Dr. Faustus was also influenced by the beauty of Helen. W.B. Yeats also writes a famous poem, No Second Try, and he made a statement that people like Helen, beautiful ladies, eat crazy salad. So the whole character of Helen is depicted in a different way. One, she was very, very beautiful, and this beautiful was a aching beauty, the beauty that destroyed nations, that destroyed many heroes. So Helen is presented as this kind of a woman, which you know, rather led to the War of Troy. That is one character which is referred in many, many literary texts of both Greek and English literature. Moving on, women as a leader, as a soldier, woman is not just beautiful. Woman is considered as a brave leader. Now we talk about one important character called Joan of Arc. Probably you know about Joan of Arc. She is also known as Maid of Lorraine. She is a French character. She appears in French literature, French history, and she also appears as a major character in G.B. Shaw's Saint John. You know, there is something about interesting about her story. At the age of 13, actually, just a daughter of a farmer, and Joan began to hear voices of God, Saint Margaret, and Saint Catherine, and she was given the responsibility of saving France by the messengers of God, and she began to nurse the dream of saving her own country because during that time France was under the clutches of British forces, particularly Burgundy. So this is what we call in the history 100 Years War. And during that time, Joan wanted to take responsibility. It was a medieval society which never accepted women as a leader, which is reluctant to accept a girl like, hmm, Joan as their leader. That was an impossibility. But it was during this kind of rigid time she was able to convince Earl of Badricourt, and then makes her way to the king who was incompetent, Charles VII, and at the age of 16, she decided to fight for French forces, and she cropped her hair and dressed in men's clothes. Yeah, and finally, she was able to convince the king too, and in the siege of Orleans, Battle of Orleans, she was victorious. And then all people begin to praise Joan as the leader, the maid. She was considered as the maid, and she was responsible for installing Charles VII as the king of France, and which was actually not liked by the seniors because they were ready to lose the war but not allow a young girl like Joan to win it. That is the very traditional and very orthodox mentality, and the church also opposed her rise. And obviously, Joan was under the eye of storm, and there were plans to curb her growth. She decides to capture Paris, but it was during this time French forces joined, some people joined with English, and Joan was captured. She was handed over to church, and Cachon and gave her death punishment, and Joan was burnt on the stake. She was burnt on the stake with a cross in her hand. Uh, so there were charges against her that she is not, you know, mm, a real woman. She is devilish. There is charges of heresy on her, and the girl was burned. Of course, after 500 years, she was canonized as the saint. And you see, J.B. Shaw wrote a wonderful play, Saint John, which beautifully depicts the historical character John. So she also inspired many films, and the recent film on her is The Messenger, and she is a very interesting character, that appears in many uh, literary texts. Next comes the Indian character, particularly Sakuntala. Shakuntala is a famous character immortalized by Kalidasa, a famous Indian dramatist of ancient times. In his famous drama, Abhijnana Shakuntalam, he beautifully portrays Shakuntala as a romantic lover. Shakuntala, many of you know who is Shakuntala. Shakuntala is like a fairy child. She was born of the union between Vishwamitra, the great sage, and the nymph Menaka. Menaka was sent by gods to disturb the penance of Vishwamitra, and it is because of this union a beautiful lady Shakuntala was born. But when Menaka was going back, she left the child and she was nursed by the sage called Kanva. So she is the foster child of Kanva. So in the play, we come to know that she is full of beauty, full of youth, that is beautifully presented by Kalidasa, the romantic description of beauty of Sakuntala. Of course, the best paintings come from Ravi Verma. That's what we see in the picture. And so the story goes on, and when she was in, full youth, uh, oozing youth, we can call, and she falls in love with Dushyanta, the king of Hastinapura, who came to the forest for hunting. And, it was a kind of a love at first sight. And when Dushyanta falls in love with her, they marry in a Gandharva style. And he gave her a ring as a mark of his love and marriage, and goes away on an urgent work. In the meanwhile, Shakuntala was suffering from, a kind of pangs of love because of a separation, and she was in the memory of Dushyanta. And when uh, the says Durvasa visited the hermitage, she neglected his callings, and she does not give attention when he called, and he was very angry, and he cursed her that your lover forgets you. In the meanwhile, Shakuntala, had to go, and Kanwa says goodbye to her. But while she was going, she lost her ring in the water, and Dushyanta forgot her name and his relationship because of the curse given by Durvasa. And later, there was some kind of a trouble that Shakuntala had to face, but the play ends happily when an angler found the ring, and Dushyanta, on seeing the ring, remembers everything that happened in the past, and he went to forest and took Shakuntala back to his palace and made her the prime queen, and Bharata was born to them. This is a very interesting play, and Shakuntala is considered as the most beautiful woman and a wonderful lover. And Abhijnana Shakuntalam is considered as one of the most romantic Sanskrit plays in India. Moving on, I'm just talking about one American novel, The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne in 1850. I'm just trying to talk about women in Puritan society, how women are subjected to uh, punishment, how women are continuously subjected to disciplining their body, disciplining the mind. This discipline is only for women, and particularly the Puritan societies normally imposed this kind of restriction. We find Puritanism in England as well as in America. So, in American literature, we read about Puritan society. One of the best works is Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter. The Scarlet Letter speaks about an interesting character like Hester Prynne. Hester Prynne actually, in fact, uh, becomes the victim of the society. Her husband chilling work is disconnected with Hester Prynne. She comes to the New England and to find her some job because she was shipwrecked and brought to New England in Boston, and she doesn't know how to make her life. And it was during this time she came in contact with the pastor called Dimsdale, and there was a secret relationship between Dimsdale and Hester Prynne, and Hester Prynne gave birth to a girl called Pearl. But the Puritan society considers that without a husband, how could she give birth to a child? And she was subjected to punishment and sent to jail, and she was given a badge of A. A means adultery. And somehow she was not ready to reveal the name of her lover Dimsdale, because Dimsdale is a noted pastor, and she doesn't want to disturb his name. And she suffers silently. But she does all the good work to the society. She helped a lot of poor people. She, in fact, in spite of being, you know, mm, given a wrong impression by the Puritan society, she continues to work for the people. She was a seamstress involved in sewing, tailoring, and all that. But her uh, husband comes back, Chillingworth, with the name Chillingworth. He wanted to know the real father of Pearl, but she does not reveal it. But later we come to know that he wanted to take revenge on Dimsdale, whom he considers her secret lover. But finally, what happens, Dimsdale himself declares on a scaffold of the town that he wrote himself A on his chest, and he says that he is the real father of Pearl, and he is responsible for all her suffering. And people come to know that the person who was religious was involved in it, but himself was a very good man. But he confesses at the end, and he dies on the lap of uh, Hester Prynne. And what happens in the end is that uh, Hester Prynne is considered as a very good woman. Chillingworth dies later, and Pearl got married to some important person in Europe, and Hester Prynne continues her life in the same place, but with a new A is not for adultery. A is something special, that she is not a bad woman. She is really a good woman in the society. This kind of portrayal is also found in U.R. Ananthamurthy's uh, samskara, and the character of Chandri, the question of Praneshacharya is beautifully depicted, and how the Puritan society considers woman is interestingly portrayed in the novel of Nathaniel Hawthorne. Famous characters in literature continue, and now I am going to talk about women in Holocaust literature, and particularly Anne Frank's diary. Many people know about the importance of Anne Frank. Anne Frank is remembered as one of the greatest diary writers in the world. If at all diary literature is famous today, one of the reason is Anne Frank. She's a brave Jew child who suffers during the Nazi rule. You know very well that how in Nazi Germany Jews were subjected to intense suffering. A lot of Holocaust literature is also available, and one of the interesting character is Anne Frank. She wrote her diary, and whom she addresses as Kitty. At the age of 13, she wrote diary. That's very, very important. At the age of 13, the knowledge of this girl, the intense understanding of life, how she lived life minute by minute, because there was, death anytime, and she could wait for death anytime at that time. So every day is important for her, every minute is important for her, but she was very brave and optimistic, even at the hour of disaster. So her diary is remarkable for the spirit that is injected in it by Anne Frank. She remained triumphantly and heartbreakingly human, and her famous statement in mm, her diary is, think of all the beauty still left around you and be happy. This is very important. See the very uh, wisdom, or the acceptance of life by a 13-year-old girl, the understanding, the maturity of this girl. Think of all beauty still left around you. Some beauty still left around you, despite of all the bombings, firings outside. She's still trying to. Every sunrise is very important for her, and be happy. She was happy as long as she was alive. So it's a must read that one should read the diary of Anne Frank, and you will come to know how important life is. The famous characters in literature, again, I would be talking about another interesting women character, Portia. Woman as an intelligent lawyer, or barrister, whatever you can call. It's a very interesting character in Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. Merchant of Venice is also called the story of friendship, story of love, story of pound of flesh. She's a charming character. In comedies, Shakespeare created wonderful heroines like Portia, Rosalind, Helen, Hermia. So similarly, in The Merchant of Venice, Portia is presented as a wife of Bassanio. Bassanio is a friend of Antonio. The story runs like this. Antonio was a merchant of Venice. Bassanio wanted to participate in the um, ordeal, and he asked for money, and Antonio borrowed money from Shylock, giving him a bond that if he does not return the money, he would give a pound of flesh. Unfortunately, Bassanio goes out to participate, in a kind of a swayamvara, and he wins in that, and he married Portia. By the time he comes back, Antonio's ships did not return, and he was not able to pay back Shylock's money. Shylock goes to court asking for a pound of flesh, and Portia comes back, and although Bassanio says he would give double, Shylock does not, want. He wanted death of Antonio because Antonio was Christian, Shylock was a Jew, and Shylock wanted death of Antonio. So there, Portia comes as the lawyer in place of Bellario, and she says that in the beginning she talks about importance of mercy. Shylock, please show mercy. Mercy is twice blessed. It blesseth the giver, it blesseth the taker. So only mercy seasons justice. Mercy is God's gift. Please show mercy. But Shylock does not agree. And finally, she tricks him in the law point. She says that if you want pound of flesh, take only pound of flesh, but you should not shed a single drop of blood. This is a very tricky point, and Shylock was flabbergasted. He, he was strict, and obviously he was defeated. Shylock was punished for that, and Antonio was saved by the intelligent argument by Portia. Portia is not only intelligent, she was beautiful, she was a romantic lover. So, woman as an intelligent lawyer, she is one of the finest examples in literature. Shakespeare portrayed her as intelligent heroine. Another interesting character as woman as a mother, and woman as not only just a true mother, but a symbol of motherland too. Most of the time, we consider motherland, and motherland is equal to mother. And that is proved in Maxim Gorky's famous short story, The Mother of a Traitor. How woman, besides being a mother to her own child, is also a great citizen of the country. And she too has a mother. That mother may be motherland. So in this story, the character of Monna Mariana is beautifully portrayed. Monna Mariana had a son. It's a Russian story. But her son joins the enemy forces, and people in the city begin to blame her. There was war was going on. The city was already bombed. The city was under fire from enemy forces. Half the city was burning, and Monna was walking in the city. And people come to know that her son joined enemy forces, and he was leading the enemies. And she is considered as mother of a traitor. Monna asked for meeting her son, and the city guards uh, send her to her son, and she speaks to her son beautifully, and later asks him to lie on her lap. And Monna Mariana took a sword and stabbed her own son. She kills her own son for the sake of her own country. After killing her son, she performed her duty as the citizen, responsible citizen of the country, because she killed the enemy of her own motherland. But as a mother, she does not want to live without a son. That's why she stabs herself or kills herself at the end. It's a heart touching story in which a woman considers her motherland as supreme and superior to her own son. So she performed a duty both as a citizen of the country at the same time as a mother. And with this, I complete this discussion on Mona Mariana. Another character I want to discuss today is woman in that long silence. There is one woman and silence. You know, woman should not speak much. She should be silent. There are two texts I am discussing here. One, a text by Shashi Deshpande's That Long Silence, in which there is a character of Jaya who married Mohan, and she was a postgraduate, but she was not permitted to work anywhere. She has to be the mother of her two children. She has to take care of her husband. Although her husband, is a corrupt official, she had to suffer everything. That long silence. She has a capacity to write short stories, essays, but she was not actually supported by her husband. She was supported by another neighbor called Kamat, and finally she breaks her silence. And that is one interesting story. Jaya is a talented writer, but with no support from family. To express herself, she has to break her silence. So, women's problems and predicaments or long silence is discussed and described beautifully in Shashi Deshpande's novel. Another interesting character is Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen's Doll's House. The character of Nora in Doll's House is very, very interesting. And we come to know that in this particular drama, Nora is a good wife. Her husband, Hammer, says that she is like a doll. Woman is considered as a doll. We don't want to give her greater prominence than doll. Doll is beautiful, but doll has its own limitations. It doesn't have any role in decision making. Although she is a good wife, uh, her limitations are, he says she's a spendthrift. She spends so much. So, what happens in this play? She had to face a conflict because when her husband was seriously ill, she forged the signature of her father, took money from the bank, and helped the recovery of her husband, saved him from the deathbed. But after some time, this case is revived by one Krogstad, a villain. Krogstad was dismissed by Hammer from the bank, and Krogstad began to blackmail Nora. So if you don't help me, I will open you a case. And Nora was in great difficulty how to reveal this. When she reveals this truth to her husband begins to talk about law, importance of law. He doesn't support her. Although she did all this for the sake of her husband, there was no support from her. And finally, she thinks that all she did is for the sake of her husband and her two children. The play ends with the slamming of the door behind, and she goes out into the world of freedom. So, this is considered as one of the bold plays by Henrik Ibsen in 20th century. It influenced many plays, later what we call problem plays, written by variety of writers. So, throughout this particular session, I discussed women characters in different forms and different roles and responsibilities. Woman as a beautiful, you know, a woman as an intelligent person, woman as a lover, woman as a mother, woman as a long sufferer. So, woman as a friend, woman as a leader. So, women characters played a very important role in all literary texts. So, all the writers, whether it is Indian, American, English, French, uh, try to portray women in their texts from different points of view. With this, I'm going to close today's session. Thank you very much for listening.